Thank you. Ladies, gentlemen, I would like to start with this one. I always start with this picture because it's important when looking at PureBallast or ballast in general, who is the supplier. We have over 100 years of experience. We actually installed our first separator 101 years ago on US Navy. And during this time, we have gained a lot of experience with the marine industry, which we then also have used when developing the ballast water treatment system. Today we have sold around 1,700 systems. Actually, it's 1,800. I just checked the numbers yesterday. So it's above 1,800. It's increasing over time. When it comes to our system, it's compliant with all water types. And when I say that, that means that we can operate in brackish, marine, and freshwater without limitations. And that's important to have in mind when looking at a ballast water treatment system. We have the US Coast Guard approval. There are 6 suppliers that have it now, and there are 4 standing in line, and there will come more over time. And that's good. That gives a healthy business environment. What also is important when looking at a supplier is how the organization looks like. And we have an interesting discussion here during coffee break. It's not only about the technology, it's about the whole journey. When you start to think about what kind of solutions do you want to install, what kind of technology, that's the first step. The second step is to understand, can the supplier supply the support you need during the whole retrofit process? After that, you push the button and the system should operate, and you should be in compliance. And you need to have a supplier that supports you in that, both when it comes to service, when it comes to spares, but also to train your crew. So there's a lot of factors to consider, especially when you are choosing a ballast water supplier, where we have today around 70 on the market. So the convention, it was, IMO adapted the convention in 2004. And before I started at Ballast, it's about 1.5 years ago, it was always talk about next year it will be rectified, and next year. And it took quite some time before it did. So in September 2017, it was ratified. So quite many years before it actually came true. What happened during this time is also then that there has been a lack of confidence in the guidelines. And this lack has also resulted in new revised G8 testing guidelines, which I will talk a little bit about today, because that will also change how the landscape will look like for the suppliers. So what is new with the revised G8 guidelines? There's not so many who are talking about that. We can just look at a few bullets of what is actually new. When it comes to testing facilities, testing is to be carried out by an independent facility accepted by the administration. So that's one thing. When it comes to salinity and temperature, there are also some news about that. It has to be, the testing has to be carried out in the full range, and with all salinities, so fresh water, brackish water, and marine water. And there is a temperature range between 0 to 40 degrees or 2 to 40 degrees when it's fresh water. So this is also new. Consecutive testing. So land-based testing, it needs to consist of 5 consecutive valid test cycles to show D2 compliance. And shipboard testing is to reflect actual ballast operations, and in total 3 consecutive valid tests. And that test has to be done during a period not less than 6 months. So there are stricter criteria here for doing the testing, which will affect which suppliers that will survive after 2020 when it comes to supplying systems according to the revised G8. There are also requirements of the system design limitations called SDL. So that means that the minimum and maximum flow rates, the time between ballast uptake and discharge, and other design limitations such as water quality expressed by oxidant demand and UV transmittance, all of these things, they need to be specified on the type approval certificate. And that is also new. So it will be a much more transparency of which suppliers that actually follow through these tests. So looking at the revised G8, we believe that this will change also the supplier landscape here in the future. And there will be very few that actually will manage these tests because there are also quite similar demands as doing the US Coast Guard tests. We were the first ones that received the IMO revised G8, and we are of course very happy about that. What it means is that the installations from the 28th of October, all installations 2020, 28th of October, need to be according to the revised G8. So what does it mean for the vessel owner? Well, it means that if you have a supplier that has a revised G8 certificate, you have an assurance of a future-proof fleet installation. You have an assurance of a supplier that has gone through much more rigid testing. So this is something to help you in your choice of a ballast water treatment supplier. When it comes to US Coast Guard, the regulations entered into force in 2012, and we then began to do the testing the same year, and we got a very nasty Christmas present in December 2015, where it was not accepted, the test that we done. So we had to retest in record time, and we received the US Coast Guard approval in December 2016, so much better Christmas present this time. So there are 6 approved systems today and 4 that are standing in line, and then there will be more, definitely. When it comes to testing for US Coast Guard, there have been some limitations for us, and we have heard from the industry that this is causing issues. And what I'm talking about is this zero or the holding time. The time between ballasting and deballasting. The longer the time, the more difficult for you. What we have seen is that this is an issue, a problem, which we need to do something about. So we have, last year we have tested and completed the testing for 0-day holding time. So this means that once we have the certificate updated, and you can see that when you go into the Marine Safety Center in US Coast Guard that there is something that Alfa Laval is doing, because it said there that we are waiting for an approval. And what we're doing there is to get an approval for 0-day holding time, so the testings that we have done. US Coast Guard had released just recently a policy when it comes to ballast water treatment systems. And I would like to come back to what I just said initially in the presentation. It's not only just about the technology when you choose a supplier. It's much more than that. It's about supplying the support you need over the whole lifetime of the vessel. It's about spares, it's about service, but it's also about training the crew. And who is the best to train your crew in the equipment if not the supplier of the equipment. So this is something that we're working a lot with. And this picture here just shows that it is much more stringent. It's not accepted by US Coast Guard if you're not having enough consumables and you're out of compliance. That is not acceptable. It's not acceptable if you're out of compliance due to lack of spares. It's not acceptable if you're out of compliance because your crew doesn't know how to operate the system. These things are things to think about also when looking at the ballast water treatment system, not only the technology as such. So just a short summary of what else to think about, because I really would like to emphasize on it is a matter of having a supplier that can support you in the whole journey, from the start when you start scratching your head, what kind of equipment, what kind of technology should I use, till the time you are pushing the button and starting up the system, and 10, 15 years along the journey of operating the system. So, for summarizing very short, our intention is always to keep in step with the legislative demands, and that's what we have done with US Coast Guard, that's what we have done with the G8. And this is a way for us to give the owner confidence in that we will be here 5, 10, 15, 20 and more years to support an installation. We're always an early mover, releasing the systems in compliance with legislation, because we also want to learn. When we started in 1997 in cooperation with Wallenius Waters to do the initial development of the ballast water treatments, we have since then released 3 versions of systems. And during that journey we have learned a lot. And you have child sicknesses initially with systems, but if you have operated for quite a few systems, quite a few long time, you also learn from them. As I said, we have now around 1,800 systems sold, and 600 of those are retrofits. Retrofits, which is a challenge as such. I see my time is starting to run out here, but the summary is the importance that I would also once again emphasize in. When you're looking at the ballast water treatment system, think about how the supplier can support you in the whole journey, from the technology as such, but also when it comes to service and support and training of your crew for the vessel's lifetime. Thank you for that.